I'm Dave Wiesdock, Sage of Creative Scaffolding.
And I'm Jen West, Professional Rebel of Delight.
And this is Shadow Casting. All right, today is Quote Day.
Quote Day!
Quote Day! So I found a fun quote, a little different than our normal share, but I still think it captures the essence of what shadow casting can be about. And I just couldn't pass the quote up.
Definitely hit me with it. I love all of the quotes you've shared so far. And I think our audience is going to like this one as well.
Great. So this quote comes from Mark Nepo. He is considered like a spiritualist, philosopher, writer. And he wrote, "To journey without being changed is to be a nomad. To change without journeying is to be a chameleon. To journey and be transformed is to be a pilgrim." Okay.
There's so much depth in keeping it short. We will keep it short.
So
we will.
Oh, yeah. So here's my really quick interpretation. First, I think no mystery to you, but maybe to our audience, the first word that jumped out at me was chameleon, because that was something I needed to work through. I am very cerebral in my experiences. And so I would often have transformation internally, but because I'm not journeying and really being in the experience, it sort of turned chameleon-y. I would learn how to be what people needed around me to get to a certain result, and sacrificing who I was, changing who I was, being a chameleon. Whereas I feel like there's the flip side of that, right? There's this sort of opposite side of the pendulum where people can go through journeys without really being changed. And those are the nomads, the people that sort of wander around from place to place. And being a little bit of an explorer and adventurer myself, that is appealing to me. But there's this sort of warning with it of, don't just go and experience, like be in the experience, embody the experience, allow it to affect you and be a part of it. And there's a certain vulnerability with that on both of these sides that is being missed. So if you change without journeying, or journeying without changing, you're sort of being hard with who you are. Yeah. Whereas the last line sort of hits this idea that it's a both and, which we talk about a lot. It's a journey and a transformation. And as both sort of coalesce within you in the middle of the pendulum swing, you reach this mindset of this pilgrim. Now, I'm not going to lie. I had to look up the definition of a pilgrim, but I think you found it, right, Jen? So do you want to share what that is and maybe some of your perspective on this quote?
Yeah. Well, looked it up. I found a whole bunch of definitions, but my very favorite definition was from dictionary.com. And it's a person who journeys, especially a long distance, to some sacred place as an act of religious devotion. And that was just the cleanest version, because it speaks about a long distance. It speaks about a sacred place. There's a reason for the travel. The whole point of the journey is to be transformed. It's the reason you're going in the first place. And I love that. I love that so much. The point is actually for something sacred, for something that has purpose and meaning and growth and enlightenment. And it's powerful. I like that a lot. And yeah, and we've all experienced, well, maybe not everybody, but I would imagine a great majority of people have experienced the chameleon. And that's like in high school, where you're trying to find your tribe. And so you try to do whatever will make you fit in. And that's what the chameleon is. You're not going anywhere. You're in the same spot, but whoever you talk to, you're a different character because you just want to be liked. And it's a crazy thing to be. And it was the first thing that caught my eye was the chameleon. But I think also I resonate with the taking a journey and not being changed, and being the nomad, because I recently went to Vietnam. And while that was an amazing experience and I had so much fun, the experience was to go on a hike through caves. and I'm already an adventurer. I've hiked up mountains. I've done this stuff. And the hike was with others, and I had a guide, and there were people who set up the tents. I wasn't changed. I was just enjoying the adventure in that particular one. And I had a brilliant time, and I loved the trip, and I loved the people. But I see Dave saying, "Were you not changed? Are you sure?" So go ahead, hit me with it. What are you thinking with those smirky little eyes?
I think you were changed. See, here's the really interesting part of this quote to me. This is why I think Pilgrim poked me a little bit before we talked about it on the quote here, because pilgrimage implies a known journey. When the pilgrims, so we're from America, obviously. And so when the pilgrims came to America, they were escaping religious persecution. There was a purpose to coming to America. They were trying to establish a better lives for themselves. I think you were changed at Vietnam and through the cave experience because you and I talked a lot while you were out there. And while you were catered in your pilgrimage, you were still changed because there were distinct experiences you and I discussed where you had to apply things that we are just starting to dabble into that we're not even talking about on our podcast, really. And you had to experience it in a way that was necessary to continue your journey. The part that comes to mind for me is when we were talking about there was that one part in the cave where you showed me you guys had to walk down that long hill and then like through some waist deep water or something and then back up. And you said it was slippery and it was like halfway through the day and you guys were a little bit exhausted and you leaned into some stuff that you're playing with now that you wouldn't have otherwise had to have with that experience. And so I think you were transformed because I think that made it a little, it brought something that you're playing with into your knowing because you were like, oh, I can use this outside skill into something that is happening to me right now. And for me, as your friend, mentee, colleague, I have seen a change in you from the outside looking in how you express your knowing around this thing. Does that make sense? So I think you were changed a little.
Yeah, maybe it didn't feel like a change because it was so light and fun. Like
Yeah.
there was never this suffering to it. It was just great and loving. But I will lean into that and just kind of sit with it and see what arises.
No, that's fun. And I could be wrong. You know,
Yeah.
it's not a belief of mine. I'm not saying I know this. I'm just saying that that's interesting because when you shared the experience with me when you had it, like that instantly is what came to mind. It's like, oh no, you were changed by this. You experienced some things.
Yeah. Well, and I am now a world traveler and I traveled alone. And that at least that was a change because I'm more confident in my ability to travel to countries where I do not speak the language and to deal with the people and find my way around. And now I have a knowing of it. So there's a confidence that it can
Yeah.
be done again.
The other thing I would add to, by the way, is that a pilgrimage is a journey to a destination. And you yourself said that it's the journey that changes you, not the destination. It is also a devotion to something. I would say that you both became devoted to a practice that you're now doing because of, well, I don't know if it's because of this. You would have stayed devoted, but I think it added to your devotion. And I would say that because of the journey and the experience itself, it's what affected that devotion for you. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm over dramatizing what happened for you, but I really think actually the more that I'm sitting with this quote for that experience that you shared with me, I think there's some pilgrimage going on there. I don't know that there's a nomad.
All right, all right. I'll be a pilgrim. I'm always trying to pilgrim to a little bit more knowing and a little bit more enlightenment towards that direction. So anything that takes that way. And if you see change in me, I may not have acknowledged it in myself, but I do appreciate it from you. So thank you.
Here's the other thing I'll add, because I know this is a quote podcast, so we want to keep these brief for our audience. The other thing about the pilgrim and the devotion is that when I think of these words, I think of it in the religious sense, because again, when I learned about pilgrims, they were escaping religious persecution. When I read about pilgrimages, they're usually to religious destinations. However, in the quotes that we read, it was more about commitment to a journey. It just happens that the theme of that journey can typically be religious, but it doesn't have to be. And I think that that's an important thing for our audience, especially with shadow casting. When we interact with people around us, we can be the chameleon where we kind of hide who we are or try to fit in. We can be a nomad where we're maybe trying to do that geographical cure and escape, where we're not wanting to address some things. But when we sort of sit in that oscillation between that two, that little sweet spot, there is a transformation that happens, and it happens within, but it has to be this both and. And for me, I haven't been able to leave. I've never left America. I would love to one day. I want to go and experience those things in Europe and the country. And so, from someone that hasn't gone and done that and interacting with someone that has, like yourself, there is a change there. So, yeah, maybe it is subtle. And maybe that is a good point to bring up with this quote, is that these changes don't have to be these big, profound journeys. They can be internal, they can be subtle. And the changes can be noticed by others and not even yourself. And that's why this works so well for shadow casting, because not every shadow we cast, we know we're casting. And so learning how to be more open and aware of those things is the beauty of kind of where this quote can come in for you.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to look at it. And this is a fun quote for our audience to explore. Where are you a nomad? Where are you being a chameleon? And where are you kind of on your pilgrimage, whether that be through your purpose or some adventure? Is it changing you?
Yeah. So, as always, make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening from. Drop us a like or a comment. Be sure to share out the podcast, especially if you're loving these quote ones, these short little snippets for your week. And
Until next time.
see ya.